Hi, everyone. Unmuting my mic, starting the show with a bang. Really good job, Brox. Welcome back to Live at the Roxy on this Friday, September 8th. Talking about Jimmy Fallon today. I want to talk about Jimmy Fallon, and I also want to talk about whatever you guys want to talk about. So, as always, streamlabs.com/Roxy Stryer. Send in your support if you guys want to see this show continue to grow and go. It is a fan funded show and it only exists because you guys allow it to. So please keep sending that in. I appreciate you. I do think tonight I'm probably going to do a Patreon AMA. So if you're a patron, look out for that. And yes, that is what's going on. I've been loving the Discord. I gotta say, for the patrons in my Discord, patreon.com/Roxy Stryer, there's one channel called Dating is Hard. It's my favorite channel. Before anybody goes on a date, we talk about it. After, we get to recap. We talk about how difficult it is, or people who have found success kind of give advice in there. Whatever. I'm loving that channel in the Discord. I never knew how poppin' it was going to be, and it seems like a lot of us are struggling in that department. So if you're not already a patron, for $5, you can join our Discord, and it is hopping in there. So please come and join. All right, let's talk about what's going on with this Jimmy Fallon situation. I also kind of want to talk about Burning Man. I keep wanting to talk about Burning Man, and I haven't yet. So maybe I'll do that on Patreon unless you guys are so inclined to have me discuss this Burning Man debacle in Streamlabs. But okay, let's jump in with the Fallon situation. So if you're like me, yesterday you heard the news that Jimmy Fallon was being, for lack of better words, Ellen DeGeneres, right? Like he was being known as this like guy who was not treating his employee well, and this article came out in the Rolling Stone that was a piece that I think it was 2 current employees and 14 previous staff members came out talking to a reporter about the Jimmy Fallon situation of it all, which was that there was a good Jimmy and a bad Jimmy, and Jimmy was accused of being drunk on a few different occasions. Jimmy was accused of not treating his staff well, and there was other showrunners that also, from the top down, were not being kind to their staff. So I read the entire piece, and I also watched the reporter of the piece on, I think she did a CNN, Christy Lee Yandoli. She did a really good job kind of depicting what she had learned through the 16 current and former staff members. Yeah, so 14 and 2. And the piece is worth a read again on Rolling Stone. You can check it out, but I'm going to go over the parts I went through and I took notes, and I'm going to be reading different quotes from the entire article to kind of talk about what it was that came out about him. And then I want us to talk about what it is we think should happen now. Do we think that this is damning for him? Do we think that what he did was horrible? Do we think it's redeemable? All of that. So we'll be discussing that here today. Like I said, get your thoughts in streamlabs.com/Roxy Stryer. I'm not going to be here that long. This is the topic that we are covering today, and we will spend some time on this. And I'll be back for the patrons tonight / this weekend. So that. Okay. Let's get right into the Streamlabs to start. Thank you so much to the people who are in here supporting the show in the way that makes it so that the show is able to continue, starting with Jake Yacovetta, who sent in saying, I've had dick moments, but never to someone who worked for me, and definitely not consistently to where there's a fucking Rolling Stone article about it. The apology ain't enough, but I don't know what is enough. Okay, interesting comment, Jake. Let's go through it and then we'll talk about it just by a show of people in the chat. Just curious. Have you read the Rolling Stone article, or have you just seen people talking about it? So either right, I read it, or right, I did not read it. I'm just curious how many people have actually read the article. While you guys are writing that, shout out to Galaghost. Roxy, hello, fellow Bostonian. What's up, friend? With Fallon situation, what's your biggest case of someone you admired and turned out to be horrible? I would probably say Louis C.K. I don't know about turned out to be horrible as the way I would phrase that, but was let down by somebody that I was just a diehard fucking fan of. Yeah, that was a big one for me. And again, I think this redemption thing is a very important thing. But thank you for the question, Galaghost, and to everybody in here. Let's see. Okay. So Mike read it. Scott did not. Muhammad did not. Jeremy says both. You both read it and did not read it? Confusing. Sean read it. John didn't. Mark didn't. Jamal didn't. Got you. Okay, cool. So it's a mixed boat in here. And I'm going to just go through it with you guys to give the highlights. Read it on your own if that's what you want to do, but we'll just talk about some of this and we'll break it down. I'm going to read a little bit, we'll talk about it, read a little bit, talk about it. Okay. So the top of the article, again, it's a Rolling Stone piece. It's called Chaos, Comedy, and Crying Rooms Inside Jimmy Fallon's Tonight Show. And then the log line on it or whatever that's called says 16 current and former staffers say Fallon's erratic behavior spoiled their dream of working on the Tonight Show. This came out on the 7th, 9:30 in the morning. That was yesterday. Since then, it's been updated 2 times. One of those times was to include Jerry Seinfeld uh, giving a comment that previously he had not commented, and now he's commenting on it because he's mentioned at some point in there. And the second one was to include the fact that Jimmy Fallon apologized to his staff members after this. Okay, so let's go through it. Here are some of the things that really stood out to me. So they just start by kind of going over the fact that it's been tense on the set and that this longtime employee was telling this to Rolling Stone and laying out that we were going to be hearing from 2 people that were current employees, 14 people who were not, and that none of their names are included because they all thought that there could be a problem with that, which makes sense legally, right? So that's what they start by speaking about, and then they go into the fact that they're depicting him as somebody who was possibly drinking on set. So they talk about this day in which he crosses out a joke and then doesn't seem to remember that he's crossed out that joke, and that the employees were like, oh gosh, people are going to think that he's drinking. And it seems like that was a kind of a through line of the entire article. The first thing that kind of stood out to me that I wanted to speak about was this paragraph that said, it's a bummer because it was my dream job. One former employee says, writing for late night is a lot of people's dream jobs, and they're coming into this and it becomes a nightmare very quickly. It's sad that it's like that, especially knowing that it doesn't have to be that way. I think that this is very common in the entertainment industry in general, right? As we have seen, a lot of executives, a lot of people at the top do not treat their employees well. And you have this dream, right? I've had this dream since I was 3 years old of being in the entertainment industry. And as you guys know, and I'm not going to name names because I don't really tend to do that, but as you guys that have followed my career for the last 14 years that I've lived out here, you know that I've had some really shitty bosses, right? And that's not one, that's plural. And I've talked about many of them without naming names and different things that have happened. I've experienced a lot of really shit things since I've been in the industry. And very quickly, when you do come out here, it seems like I'm going to say, and this is a made up statistic, but this is what, based on my friends and my group of colleagues that I work with, I would say 80% of people who come out here, their dream is not what they thought it might be, because there are people out here who are cruel, who are mean, who are unkind, who do not support you, do not root for you. And that might be very different from your hometown situation. Now, when I say something is common, that is not me justifying it. You're going to hear me continue to say this is a common situation, right? This is where your dream is shattered because what you want to do is create art. What you want to do is create comedy. What you want to do is make people feel and laugh. But that's the entertainment part of it. It's the entertainment business, right? And the entertainment part of it is the dream. The business part of it is a nightmare for a lot of people because of who they work with or who they work for. And that is not something specific to Jimmy Fallon. That is specific to this industry and how this industry has always run and continues to run, even after things like Me Too, or even after we've brought certain things to light behind the scenes. It continues to run that way. And again, that is not me justifying what this article is saying. That is me just saying, not shocking, not surprising. Okay, yes, a lot of bosses don't tend to be nice, and a lot of dreams are crushed. Streamlabs.com/Roxy Stryer. Send in your questions, comments, concerns, support, bits, bots, thoughts, and twats, as we like to say on this show, even though it doesn't make sense. Mike Joyce in the Streamlabs, thank you, Mike, for the support. Says Jimmy Fallon, Bill Maher, Ellen, James Corden, some of these hosts that present themselves to be nice people have turned out to be pretty problematic. I wonder who will be the next to fall, and if late night talk shows will even exist after this strike. I certainly think they will exist after this strike. I think that the people that you name, Jimmy, Bill, Ellen, and James, seem to have completely different issues across the board, from being rude to waiters to being rude to staff members to being abusive to staff members, right? So sometimes when we clump all these different people together, you're calling them all problematic. I think that that is a word that is valid for you to choose, but there are different levels of things, right? And I'm not wondering who'll be next to fall as much as I'm wondering when this entire system will change, right? Everybody will be next to fall one by one because it's an entire system that's a problem. It's not, I'm not saying Jimmy Fallon is or is not a problem, but it's not Jimmy Fallon or Ellen DeGeneres. This is how they came up. And this is how the people who brought them up came up. And this is how the people who brought them up came up. It is a learned behavior. It is a business industry approved behavior. And then sometimes we end up picking somebody, pointing the finger, but throw a rock and you'll hit somebody, right? Throw a rock and you'll hit somebody that is a problem in this industry. Not suggesting you actually throw a rock. Just spin around, blindfold yourself, and point, and likely that person has been problematic if they are at the top. So continuing with this, and thank you for that comment, Mike Joyce. Again, streamlabs.com/Roxy Stryer. Continue to send in your questions, comments, concerns, thoughts. I want them on this for sure. Let's move forward. The next part that I wanted to talk about was this. Representatives for Fallon would not comment on the record for this story. After this report published, however, Fallon apologized to staffers in an all-hands Zoom call. Quote, "It's embarrassing and I feel so bad," Fallon said, according to two people who were on the call. Quote, "Sorry if I embarrassed you and your family and friends. I feel so bad I can't even tell you." End quote. Now, if you haven't read this article yet, you don't even know what he's apologizing for. So we will come back to this piece of it. But I do want to just start by saying that he has since apologized to everybody involved. It seemed like in that apology, he did not deny, he did not recant, he apologized, which is an interesting portion of this. Okay, next thing. In a statement, a spokesperson for NBC defended the program, but notably did not mention Fallon himself. This is the statement. Quote, "We are incredibly proud of The Tonight Show, and providing a respectful working environment is a top priority. As in any workplace, we have had employees raise issues. Those have been investigated and action has been taken where appropriate. As is always the case, we encourage the employees who feel they have experienced or observed behavior inconsistent with our policies to report their concerns so that we address them accordingly." End quote. Let's talk about this for a second, because there is a massive HR issue in the entertainment industry. Spokespeople say, "We encourage you to come forward." But when you do come forward, that information is often shared. And this article goes on to talk about a situation in which something happened, not with Fallon, actually, with a showrunner of the show. And the person that was accusing the showrunner did go to HR. And then HR told this person's manager, which is exactly not what they're supposed to do, because then it's essentially just outing them for coming forward about things. As you guys know, I have worked in many work environments that have shitty HR departments, and going forward to them, as the public likes to say, "Why didn't you say anything?" Going forward to them is simply not an option. It will not help the situation. It will only make your life harder. And additionally, it might lead to you getting fired, even though that would be illegal. They might fire you for something else because you're just considered to be problematic at that point. So I think that this spokesperson is dreaming if they think that come forward, it will be fine, when clearly it hasn't been fine in the past. And it's interesting that they didn't mention Fallon, but they also confirmed that they have had employees raise issues. So that's confirmation that employees have raised issues about this, which I don't know whether they intended to do that or not, but they also did not deny these issues. Streamlabs.com/Roxy Stryer. Send in your questions, comments, concerns, thoughts, support. This is another quote. The producers felt this pressure, and that translated down to all their employees. People that worked under them felt this pressure that if you made one mistake, you were gone and would be easily replaced. One former employee says, "You have all these NBC pages in the building who are ready, willing, and waiting to take your job." Okay, so I want to be 100% fair to this article, and I want to be 100% fair to this story. This complicates things a little bit for me because one of my issues with this article, one of my issues with the way this story is being presented is that there were not many specific situations. A lot of these things were feelings, and those feelings are valid. But I wish it was able to be backed up with 12 different times. And maybe people didn't want to share times because then they would be able to be identified. And I think that's totally reasonable. But we've heard about people in the past that have gotten angry, and there's a specific scenario. They got angry threw a shoe across the room. Like, it was kind of hard to visualize parts of this article because people said they felt this pressure. They felt suicidal, which we'll talk about soon. They felt anxious. They felt scared. They felt all these things, but there wasn't that much laying out what led to them feeling that way. They would just say, good Jimmy and bad Jimmy. And I wish that we got more information because this sentiment, regardless of what industry you're in, that if you make a mistake, you would be replaced. I do think that this is more prevalent in the entertainment industry, but this is across the board at a lot. If you are on Wall Street, wherever you are, if you are in a demanding industry, if you fuck up, you often lose your job. I knew a girl that she was working for somebody very well known, and she sent out an email on their behalf, and she forgot to BCC everybody, and instead she CC'd everybody. And therefore, all of these massive, powerful people and celebrities and all of that stuff, all of their emails were leaked out because they weren't BCC'd, they were CC'd. And that person got fired. And a lot of people thought that that was too harsh. And I'm not saying that it wasn't too harsh, but I am more understanding of somebody losing their job because they fucked up than somebody losing their job for no reason or because they were unwilling to perform something sexually or they were being emotionally abused or whatever, and so that then they were fired. It's hard for me to sit here and say, wow, it's such a bummer if you fuck up that you could be replaced. Now, I get what this person's trying to say, that you can make maybe they're trying to say you can make a small mistake and then you're on edge. And of course, a small mistake shouldn't lead to you being fired. But this part didn't resonate with me as much because I've fucked up before and I've lost jobs. My first job I ever had, I was the receptionist at a haircutting place, and I was OCD and really wanted everything to look good. And I took a hair straightener and flat ironed. You guys know this story. I flat ironed the money to put it back in the drawer so it wasn't crinkly, and everything went fine. But I just wanted everything to look good. And I got fired because my boss was saying, "You can't do that. You were taking something hot and putting it to the money, and you're fired." And you know what? I agree with their decision to fire me. Do I think they could have had a conversation with me and said, "Don't do that again," and I would have listened? Yes. But I also think I learned the lesson more because I lost my job. I'm not advocating for doing that. I'm just saying for me personally, I fucked up. I lost my job. And that's a hair receptionist when I was 14, as opposed to somebody who has a family and their livelihood is on the line and they're trying to provide for people. I'm not advocating for the same situation at those same times. I'm just saying that sometimes it's hard to feel bad for somebody you made a mistake, you didn't do it intentionally, but if you're not doing your job well and you lose your job, that's more reasonable to me than some of this other stuff in this article. Okay, we'll continue. Streamlabs.com/Roxy Stryer. Send in your thoughts, questions, concerns. Ash in the Streamlabs said, I think sometimes. Ash, what does that mean? You think sometimes what? Streamlabs.com/Roxy Stryer. Send in the rest. Curiosity's killing me, and the rest of you send in that support. Okay. This next part. Of course, every major television show has its share of pressure and chaos and turnover. Daily programs, even more so. But what happened at The Tonight Show was highly unusual in late night television, employees say. The program had 6 different groups of leadership teams, and it's 9 years on TV. In 2014, Josh Lieb started off as the showrunner. Mike DeCenso, Katie Hawkmayer, and Gerard Bradford took over as a trio in 2016. Then Jim Bell had a short stint from 2018 until 2019, followed by Late Night with Jimmy Fallon and Tonight Show veteran Gavin Purcell from 2019 to 2020. Jamie Granette, Birdard Man, and Nada Suisse, sorry for pronouncing some of these wrong, replaced Purcell in 2020 as co-showrunners until Chris Miller landed the job in March 2022. So that is something that shows that something's not fully working, right? Like to have 6 in 9 years, that's not a crime. It doesn't mean that people are horrible, but it does mean something's off. Why are you having 6 groups of leadership in 9 years? Are those people all going on to get different jobs, better jobs, higher positions? Are they leaving because this just isn't working? Is Jimmy not happy with them? Are they not happy with Jimmy? There's a lot of things here that could be happening. That's all just speculation, though. This is the next part. Nobody told Jimmy no. Everybody walked on eggshells, especially showrunners. Another former employee says, you never knew which Jimmy you were going to get and when he was going to throw a hissy fit. Look how many showrunners went so quickly. We know they didn't last long. So on this part, again, I just wish that we got more information on what a hissy fit meant. I've worked for a lot of people who are artists that are hot and cold. They're up and down. They've got a lot of emotions. Sometimes they come out strong. Sometimes they come out sad. Sometimes they come out crazy. Sometimes they come out weird. Not be justifying it, just saying it's common. You're walking on eggshells. Often people are walking around eggshells on their boss. Oftentimes people don't tell their boss no. So in order for me to fully understand this, I wish we understood the extent of what a hissy fit was, what good and bad Jimmy were, because this to me just sounds like, okay, I need a little more information. Next part, with an ever-changing cast at the top, employees say they had nightmares related to work and were in constant state of fear. One employee said they had their first anxiety attack while working at the show and were put on anti-anxiety medication for the first time. Another employee says they felt physical ramifications of their declining mental health, like their hair thinning and weakened nail beds. 4 other employees say they are in therapy because of their experiences. Some people say they experienced suicidal ideation as a result of working environment. Now, let me start by saying that's fucking horrible. No job should make you have suicidal ideation. No job should cause you to lose your hair. I hope this doesn't sound insensitive because that's the first part. The second part is, again, these are feelings. This article does a good job of garnering sympathy for these employees, and I do feel sympathetic for them. But we are living in a fucked up, crazy time right now. The fact that somebody is getting on anxiety medication for the first time or having their first anxiety attack, we just lived through a fucking pandemic. We are living through a global crisis with global boiling. We are living through multiple war times right now, what's going on in Iran, what's going on in Russia and Ukraine. It is a very fucking stressful time. And that's not me saying that they don't have stress at work, but somebody starting anxiety medication and somebody feeling stressed and somebody's mental health declining, I don't know that it's accurate to pin that all on Jimmy Fallon. It could be, but I would need more information to know why, other than this is how they feel. What happened? What happened? It's not that I don't believe them. It's just I don't know you and I don't know what happened that you feel that way. So that's kind of how I feel about this. Streamlabs.com/Roxy Stryer. There's got to be more information here, and they just weren't comfortable sharing it, which again, I understand, but then we're missing pieces. This is a quote. Mentally, I was in the lowest place of my life. I didn't want to live anymore. I thought about taking my own life all the time. One former employee says, I knew deep down I would never actually do it. But in my head, I'm like, why do I think about this all the time? One employee says they lost nearly 20 pounds during their time working under showrunner Granite Betterman, felt like they were on edge all the time and cried themselves to sleep every night. Some of this had to do with the showrunners as well. And once again, this is fucking awful, but it's how somebody feels. And I don't feel like they're fully backing up these feelings uh, with incidents, although I'm sure there are. This next one says, according to most employees who spoke to Rolling Stone, it's common knowledge behind the scenes that Fallon's temperament, mood, and treatment of staffers was erratic. These employees say they've witnessed Fallon snap at crew members, express irritation over the smallest things, and berate and belittle staffers out of frustration. 3 former employees say that he berated them in front of other colleagues and crew members. This is a little bit more of an example, but berated them about what for what? Was it having to do with work? Nothing to do with work. Neither makes it right. You shouldn't berate somebody, but I need specifics. I don't know if you guys feel the same way. Maybe you don't need specifics. Maybe you're like, okay, I've heard enough. Streamlabs.com/Roxy Stryer. Send in your thoughts. The next one says, if it was like if Jimmy was in a bad mood, everyone's day is fucked. One former employee said, people wouldn't joke around in the office. They wouldn't stand around and talk to each other. It was very much like focus on whatever it is you have to do because Jimmy's in a bad mood. And if he sees that, he might fly off. We're up against it was a commonly used phrase around the office among employees. They say to warn each other if Fallon was not having a good day, and therefore everyone else was in for a rough one as well. We all know people like this, right? If they're having a bad day, then they're going to let it be known and it's going to impact everybody else's day. It's a shitty personality trait. When you're at the top of the snake and there's nobody to check you, that sucks. Once again, if he's in a bad mood, he might fly off. What does that mean? What does that mean? What is he flying off about? Is he screaming top of his lungs? Is he throwing shit? What does fly off mean? There's a lot of terms in here that I'm like, what are you guys talking about? I feel like you keep alluding to things, but I don't know what that means. Next thing, over the years, there have been rumors and gossip about Fallon's relationship with alcohol. In 2016, the New York Post ran a story alleging NBC executives were concerned about Fallon's drinking. Fallon denied that in the New York Times profile published in 2017, saying, I could never do a day-to-day job if I was drinking every night. That's just kicking you when you're down. But 2 employees say they saw Fallon seemingly inebriated at work in 2017. Another 2 employees say on separate occasions in 2019 and 2020, they both they thought they smelled alcohol on Fallon's breath when they entered an elevator with him during the workdays. According to 8 former employees, Fallon's behavior seemed to be dependent on if he appeared to be hungover from the night before. So, again, I'm not saying that Fallon isn't drinking. I don't fucking know. But none of these are saying that they saw him drinking. None of these say that they are certain that they smelled something on his breath. None of these are saying that they know for a fact that he was hungover or not. They're saying, and these incidents are kind of years apart. Somebody thinks he was inebriated in 2017. Somebody thinks that one time in 2019 and one time in 2020. It's painting a picture in which people are making assumptions and guessing, and maybe they are right. But what doesn't seem to be painted here is this person shit-faced all of the time. We witness him drinking. We smell it every single day. Those are 3 different years, individual incidents. The hungover part, they said, seemed to be dependent on if he appeared to be hungover. I don't know what to make of that. That would be a bummer, and you shouldn't be super hungover all the time at work. Shouldn't be hungover really ever at work. As we all know, it happens to people all the time. Okay, the erratic nature of the talk show host's behavior led to widespread fear around those who interacted with him. Employees say sometimes we would get nice Jimmy, but sometimes was not a lot. One former employee said, it was just really, really sad to me that this really talented man created such a horrible environment for people there. In what way? I believe you, but in what way was he creating this horrible environment? In what way was nice Jimmy And why did you guys fear? And obviously, there's a lot of people, so I'm sure there's a lot to this. It's just, uh, what? What? Give me something. Horrible environment. We're hearing about somebody who maybe on 3 occasions over 4 years might have had alcohol in his breath, might have not, and that you were afraid of, and that you're taking anxiety medication around, which sounds fucking bad. Maybe. Streamlabs.com/Roxy Stryer, getting your thoughts. Not here much longer as we continue to go through this. One employee says, depending on Fallon's mood, they felt like his notes and feedback could be passive aggressive. Personal insults as opposed to constructive criticism. They say he would write comments like, "Are you okay? Seriously, do you need help?" Rolling Stone reviewed photos of the employee's alleged notes from Fallon that read, "Ugh, lame. What's going on with you? You've outdone yourself." Same employee says Fallon would also send combative emails, one of which was reviewed by Rolling Stone, to certain staffers if he was dissatisfied with their work. This is something that I think might bother some people and might not. If I've had passive aggressive bosses, friends, people in my life, it can be very annoying. If the criticism was just, "Are you okay? Seriously, do you need help?" I don't think I'd be best at my job. But I think, "Ugh, lame. What's going on with you? You've outdone yourself." I'm sorry. I think that I would be like, it's fucking wild. What a wild, ugh, lame. And I would want more feedback. I'd want to be able to do my job better. I've had a lot of bosses who don't give me feedback and definitely don't give me constructive feedback. Ugh, lame. 2 employees remember witnessing Fallon scold the crew member who was in charge of his cue cards in the middle of taping with comedian Jerry Seinfeld. This is an interesting, specific situation that we see 2 sides of, okay? They say it was an uncomfortable moment. Seinfeld told Fallon to apologize to the cue card production member, which he then allegedly did. The employees say this incident, which felt awkward to watch, did not make it to the version of the show that appeared on television. So we don't get to hear what happened. They just say he scolded the crew member in charge of the cue cards. I'm curious what that means, what he said, what happened. Why was he being scolded? Did he do something wrong? Did he not do something wrong? We're not getting a lot of details here. This next part is, it was very awkward, and Jerry Seinfeld was like, "You should apologize to him," almost trying to make it a joke, a former employee said. It's one of the strangest moments ever, and so many people were there, so it's kind of hard to forget. So there's so many people there, but 2 people are the ones coming forward about this. And then they say that they reached out to Seinfeld representatives and they didn't follow but prior to this article. But then once the article came out, then Seinfeld sent a statement to Rolling Stone. This is what he said. "This is so stupid. I remember this moment quite well. I teased Jimmy about a flub, and we all had a fun laugh about how rarely Jimmy is thrown off. It was not uncomfortable at all. Jimmy and I still occasionally recall it and laugh. Idiotic twisting of events." Now, so 2 employees are saying it was uncomfortable and he was scolded. Seinfeld is saying that's not what happened. I'd be interested to hear more people's perspective on it. Obviously, we all read rooms differently sometimes. Seinfeld's probably friends with Jimmy. It's probably in his best interest to protect Jimmy, but he's saying that's not what happened. So this is the first kind of specific thing we're hearing, and 2 people are saying yes, and 1 person is saying no. Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Streamlabs.com/Roxy Stryer. What's going on with you guys? Thoughts, questions, comments, concerns on this Jimmy situation? Jake Yacovetta says, "The worst thing Jimmy could ever do is answer a question Roxy asked with sure." Yeah, fuck that. But at least he'd be specific. In the summer of 2020, a video of Fallon in blackface during an SNL skit resurfaced online. I thought this was an interesting thing for them to include in this article. This came to at a heightened time of racial and social awareness because of George Floyd murder and subsequent Black Lives Matter protests across the country. Talk show host tweeted an apology for the video, saying, "In 2000, while on SNL, I made a terrible decision to do an impersonation of Chris Rock while on blackface. There's no excuse for this. I'm very sorry for making this unquestionably offensive decision, and thank you all for holding me accountable." He also spoke to New York Times about the incident, where Fallon publicly addressed the video. Employees say there is internal uproar because staff members weren't happy that the talk show host didn't directly acknowledge the incident with them. So this goes on to talk about how he made a public apology, but he didn't talk to his staff about it. Doing blackface is wrong. We all know that. He had done it in 2000, which was 20 years prior to this. Still makes it wrong. I think if I was in that position, which I wouldn't be in, but if I was, I would like to think that if I made a public apology, I would also talk to the staff about it. But it was something that didn't happen on that show and took place 20 years prior. So I don't know that he was on purpose not talking to staff about it as much as like didn't know that it was relevant to his staff as opposed to the public. But I would have to have been there to see, like, were the staff trying to talk about it and he wasn't trying to talk about it, or did they just think that it was inappropriate that he didn't say something to them? Because it just seemed like they didn't bring it up with him and he never brought it up with them. So, yeah, it's like, I know that he's spoken to Chris Rock about it. I know that he made the public apology about it. I know that they've talked about that he tweeted about it. So this part was a little confusing to me why I wasn't included. It kind of, anyway. They are the worst bosses I've ever had in my life. They use that position of power to bully and treat the staff that way. And the network is aware of how they treat people. One former employee says they're not only continue to enable it, but they reward it. That's talking about the staff at the Tonight Show, but not just Jimmy, seeming like the showrunners. 5 employees say they spoke to HR about their experiences behind the scenes of the Tonight Show in their exit interviews when they voluntarily left the show, as well as during their time of employment. One longtime employee says they never reported their issues to HR because early on in their tenure in the show, they saw colleagues of theirs attempt to speak to human resources representatives and subsequently get fired from the show. That's what I'm talking about. The HR system in the entertainment industry is fucked up. You should never get fired for reporting something to HR, and it happens all of the time. That's super duper wrong. I don't know that that can be pinned on Jimmy Fallon specifically or just the culture of this in general. Yeah, that. Streamlabs.com/Roxy Stryer, super chat in as we are almost out of here. Getting to the last parts of this that I wanted to discuss. Okay, let's see. Okay. That was super frustrating to me and kind of devastating because it felt as if I finally had someone on my side. This is about the person who went to HR. And I quickly learned that that was not the case. Everything I had relayed to HR was then relayed to my manager. So it was not a safe space. It felt as if they were acting in the interest of one person instead of the interest of the greater whole. We talked about that a little bit. And then the Tonight Show went dark in early May when the writers' strike began. The show, which employee members of the WGA would have otherwise gone on hiatus later that summer, after NBC and Fallon himself reportedly paid staffers salaries for 3 weeks in the midst of the strike. Employees were then put on unpaid leave of absence. Last week, Fallon and other late-night television hosts, Stephen Colbert, Jimmy Kimmel, Seth Meyers, John Oliver, launched a collaborative limited podcast series called Strike Force 5. While the writers' strike continues, proceeds from the podcast will go towards the host's staff members while they're out of work due to the strike. And that's a pretty cool thing. Last thing that I wanted to read. I love The Tonight Show. I love comedy. I gave my heart and soul to that place. I want to see them succeed and do well. But for that to happen, there are major changes that need to take place, starting with Jimmy. Former employee says they all need to dig their heads out of the sand and do something about the very obvious problems that we all know are happening. Okay. So that wasn't the entire article. Those are the pieces that stood out to me that I wanted to speak about. I think that this brought attention to the public that Jimmy Fallon might not be the nicest dude that we thought that, not we as in me, but a lot of people thought he was. I think it also lacked substantial evidence, as this is not a court case, but I really wish that there were, other than that thing with the Jerry Seinfeld thing, which was one thing with two different sides shown in here. There was not much other than people's feelings and talking about good Jimmy, bad Jimmy, possibly drinking Jimmy. Nobody was certain on that. I wish that there was more. Not that because I wish that there actually was more, but because I don't feel like when people now are like, Jimmy should be fired. I don't know about that. I think that Jimmy apologized. Doesn't make it right. Let's see what happens from here. I guess let's see what happens from here. I'm curious what the staff members would like to see specifically implemented. If they did want a new showrunner, it seems like they don't want more turnover or what. Any last minute thoughts, send them in. I'm out of here in 2 minutes. So streamlabs.com/Roxy Stryer. In the meantime, I'll say thank you to Jake Yacovetta, Mike Joyce, Ash, and to Galaghost for the support during the show. The financial support is the only way the show is able to continue. And thank you all for being here to watch. Manuel Akinola says, "Hey, Roxy, just supporting you. I can relate to this as I worked in the industry. Industry can be very toxic at times. Hope you're doing well." Yeah, it needs a massive facelift in general. And that is not specific to Jimmy's show. It's across the board. Oh, boy. Oh, boy. Hopefully, as generations come up, things really do start to change. Okay, my friends, stay safe, stay sane. Put down the toilet seat and lid. We don't want those flumes. Don't tremble the Holocaust. Justice for all the people who lost their lives due to excessive force. My body, my choice, wherever you are on the rainbow. We love you. We stand with the women of Iran, the bravest women we've ever seen. Golden sparkles for the Zen one himself. Garth McMurray, we're thinking about your loved one, your family. We miss you every day. And to everybody out there who is on strike for whatever their union is, I'm with you. This is so freaking challenging. For everybody out there who stands with the unions and doesn't believe in what the studios or the man is doing, fuck yeah, you're all on the right side. And patrons, I'll see you this weekend. And for the rest of y'all, so much love. Like I said, stay safe, stay sane. It's very difficult to do during this time, especially when you have an evil dick for a boss. I'm not saying that in this situation, although could be, who the hell knows. All right, later.